Cenk Uygur made some headlines because he was criticizing the Democrats, and he's now concluded he thinks it's over. Democrats are going to get draxed in the midterms. So this is in Mediaite. Quote, failure of epic proportions. Cenk Uygur concedes defeat for Dems in the midterms. So let's go to his exact words here. He said this on Twitter. It looks like we're going to lose the midterms. People will look back at Democrats' inability to pass voting rights legislation as the moment we lost everything. Stunning failure of epic proportions. And everyone in D.C. yawned because they're used to excusing Democratic failures. Okay. So that's the gist of it. I also watched his segment on this where he gives more of his reasoning as to why he thinks it's over and Democrats are going to lose. And there certainly is an argument there because he says, look, there's certain things that are like the key indicators, the most important issues that people vote on. And on virtually all of those key indicators, voters now trust Republicans more than they trust Democrats. And that, without a doubt, is a failure of the Democratic Party and the individual politicians to sort of market themselves in a way that's palatable and portray the opposition party as significantly worse than them, right? Now, having said that, do I agree with his analysis overall? I am definitely more agnostic on this than he is. So I honestly see good arguments for both perspectives on this, and I'll walk you through them. So first, let's just go to the actual numbers on it, okay? This is in 538, and when it comes to the U.S. Senate, it says Democrats are slightly favored to win the Senate. To be specific, it's a 63% chance that Democrats win the Senate. Now, it wasn't that long ago, it was, a month ago, if that, maybe even less, that Democrats actually had an 81% chance of winning the Senate. So it's nearly a 20-point swing in the direction of Republicans, and the momentum is on their side at the moment. So that is a pretty devastating data point. Now, having said that, if you just saw in a vacuum 63% chance for Democrats to win the Senate after how they bottomed out and that nobody liked them, 4 months ago? Then, you'd be like, oh shit, that's surprising, and Democrats are doing better than I expected, right? But this is what 538 has, 63% chance. Now, for the House, it's the flip of that. So Republicans win the House 73% of the time, based on the current numbers. And then look, of course, what you could do is go race for race. Here I have the Senate races up. Nevada is basically a toss-up. Georgia is kind of a toss-up. Maybe you could argue it's a lean Democrat now because of the recent scandal with Walker, and he's taken a hit in the polls as a result of that. They have Pennsylvania at 69% chance that Fetterman beats Oz, but that race has significantly tightened, and I think that's more of a coin flip than perhaps these numbers are giving it credit for. And then you have, Mandela Barnes versus Johnson, that Johnson is 73% likely to win. So you can go, race for race and figure it out here. But what makes this more of a toss-up and makes me more agnostic than, I previously was? Well, it's very simple. The whole landscape changed when Biden reduced some student loan debt, when Biden decided to do pardons for federal nonviolent weed offenders, and when Roe versus Wade happened, and when the right followed Donald Trump right off of a fucking cliff, where he's openly authoritarian. He says, just put me in or redo the election. He's still talking about this shit. There's hundreds or maybe even thousands, if you include at the local level, of politicians in the country on the right who, this is the main thrust of their argument in running. Is we're going to be authoritarian. We want to overturn the previous election. We want to rule with an iron fist. And that shit is going to turn off normies and independents and moderates. So, really, these are huge factors, and it's anybody's guess how well this plays in the election, because it is true, when it comes to the economy, voters happen to trust Republicans more. I mean, I think that's wild, but that's what the numbers show. And you have inflation is a big issue right now. And so that affects it. There's an impending recession, which virtually every expert knows is coming and has talked about how it's coming. The Fed is jacking up interest rates, which is going to increase unemployment. So the economic forecast, which usually determines elections, that's really swinging against the Democrats. But virtually every other measure, it's the opposite. It's Democrats are favored. When Roe versus Wade was overturned, you saw a colossal swing in the polls to Democrats away from Republicans. Now, are we too far removed time-wise from Roe versus Wade being overturned where that sort of has worn off? I don't know. I don't have those answers. I wish I did have those answers, but I will say this. In the special elections that we had not too long ago, like that race in upstate New York, for example, historically now, for the past decade, it's been like Republican support is undercounted in the polls. Well, in the special elections, it was the opposite. Democratic support was undercounted in the polls. Because people were mobilized, probably because of Roe versus Wade, and probably because Republicans are fully embracing authoritarianism. Look, and it's also, they literally 157 of them voted against gay marriage in the House. That just happened. This was an issue everybody thought was settled. It's like a 70% issue in the country. And then now we're getting whispers, hey, is the Supreme Court going to do that next? Are they going to overturn gay marriage? And so to have 157 Republicans vote against that is mental. 195 of them voted against a right to contraception. That's just insane. Okay, Americans don't follow all the ins and outs of politics, generally speaking, but they know Roe versus Wade was overturned, and that's super authoritarian, and Republicans want to control their lives. They know that they're going almost full fascist in support of Donald Trump. And then you also have to add in the other basic facts that for a long time under Biden's presidency, he literally wasn't doing anything. He was sitting around with his thumb up his ass. And everybody was criticizing him from every which direction. But now, the fact of the matter is, there's been a number of victories. The Inflation Reduction Act. Okay, 15% corporate minimum tax rate. Tax on stock buybacks. $369 billion for green and renewable manufacturing. And by the way, a lot of these jobs are union jobs, and a lot of this stuff is made in America. $6,000 tax credit for electric vehicles. Okay, that's just one thing. We could talk about 350,000 jobs being onshored as opposed to offshored under the Biden administration. That's a big win. The unemployment rate, despite the impending economic collapse, the unemployment rate right now is pretty low. You have the PACT Act for veterans, which of course makes it so that if they were exposed to toxic burn pits, they can get the health care that they need. You actually got some semblance of bipartisan gun legislation through. Now it's weak, but it's something. It's, money for red flag laws, for example. That's part of it. More scrutiny for people who are under the age of 21, crackdown on gun trafficking, funding for some mental health services, funding for school security. Something got done. He just took out the fucking leader of Al-Qaeda. But again, the most important thing I would argue is student loan debt reduction and the pardons for federal marijuana offenders. And you saw this in the polls. You saw Biden had polling numbers with the youth that were literally at or lower than Donald Trump's. Everybody turned on him. Immediately after he reduced student loan debt, boom, that number shot up. It spiked. So, he also got Ketanji Brown Jackson on the court. In other words, there's shit that's happening now that is better than certainly I thought it would be. And the general theory is, you deliver for people, they deliver for you. Now, I will say, and on this point I think Cenk is 100% right, even though you have some policy wins, even though you have some clear things you could point to and say, we're doing this, and these motherfuckers are crazy, the problem is Democrats are not doing that. They are not messaging. They are not doing PR. They are not marketing for themselves. They are not making the argument. And they're just letting Republicans walk all over them. Like one of the big issues, crime. They're getting, Democrats are getting hit over the head with increasing crime. They're soft on crime, we're tough on crime. They're soft on crime, we're tough on crime. There's such an easy rebuttal to that. The rebuttal is, oh, you're tough on crime, then why do you want guns in the hands of criminals? You don't even want to do basic gun reform like universal background check. Yeah, we got bipartisan gun reform through. Great. But what are you guys against? What are you guys blocking? You're the ones who are blocking universal background checks. That's on you. If you're so afraid of criminals and so afraid of a spike in crime, you should probably want to do a universal background check. You should probably want to ban high-capacity magazines, for example. You should probably want to do a federal red flag law so people who are deeply mentally disturbed can't get weapons. But you're against that. We're for that. So maybe we're the ones who are actually tough on crime and you're not. Have you considered that? So they're not running a good campaign. I mean, there's a handful of them. I think Tim Ryan is actually running a good campaign against J.D. Vance. I think John Fetterman was running a pretty good campaign, although now the polls have kind of tightened a little bit. And the media kind of turned on Fetterman in a sense recently, which is kind of making it more difficult for him. The whole stroke thing has become a big campaign issue. But Cenk is right. They're not making their argument. They're not campaigning properly. Cenk is right that on the key indicators, namely the economy, like inflation, gas prices. And by the way, make no mistake about it. Biden and the Democrats were sabotaged by Saudi Arabia. They are actively trying to make the Democrats lose, to eventually get Trump back in power. And they're not even really hiding this. Trump's their guy. They gave him probably $100 million or more to have their new golf events at his courses, I should say. They gave Jared Kushner $2 billion. We covered the story. $94 million was given from Saudi Arabia to Republican politicians. They used to split the money. We're going to buy Republicans and Democrats. Now they're actually making a decision. No, we're going to go all in on Republicans. So they cut back the oil barrels that they release every day. And that's going to make gas prices spike in the U.S. They're doing that to sabotage Joe Biden. That's what they're doing. And Biden just had to release 15 million barrels from our strategic oil reserve as a result of that. So they actively are being sabotaged. There's no doubt about it. But it is true. Gas prices, inflation, the economy, these are all issues where Republicans are trusted more. But the reason why I'm not 100% on the page with Cenk is that there's been a number of Democratic wins. And beyond that, the most important thing is Republicans overturned Roe versus Wade. Republicans just voted against gay marriage and contraception, which is incredibly extremist. And they're going all in on authoritarianism and snuggling up to Trump, even at a time when he's under 14 different investigations and he's nakedly being fascist. So there are competing things going on here. But it is true that recently the polls have sort of swung back a little bit. Democrats made up basically all the difference. Republicans were up for a very long time. Democrats made up all of that right after Roe versus Wade. And now maybe the Democrats peaked a little too early. And now the Republicans are surging back a little bit again. So look, if the economy can hang on just a little longer, I do think the most likely scenario is Democrats win the Senate, Republicans win the House. As of right now, if the election was today, I think Democrats win the Senate, Republicans win the House. So it is not a total bloodbath. But the way it is trending, it is also very possible Democrats lose the Senate and they lose the House. So he doesn't make bad arguments. I just will say I'm not 100% convinced, and I think the case is a little more split than he's giving it credit for. If you want to see me and Crystal Ball interview legends like Noam Chomsky, Cornel West, and more, subscribe to Crystal, Kyle, and Friends on Substack. $5 a month gets you the video version a day early. Remember, we take 0 ad dollars for this podcast. Or you can sign up on Substack for free and get the audio version a day later. Link in the video description box below.